Hello class, I'm going to pick up our next lesson pretty much where we left off in lesson 4, in which we were talking about interiors and 2-point perspective. So I have left the blue, which indicates where this drawing was when you last saw it, if you have been following along, and I have gone through it and I've added just a little bit of detail. Now, one thing that you'll notice is that I've kind of rounded out my forms, but everywhere I've added to things, they're still moving towards the vanishing point here and here. I've also added some houseplants, a little lamp, some curtains. For someone who loves linear perspective, I'm actually more attracted to curves. So I've gone through and added some, and I thought it would be nice to bring a little bit of life into this interior space. Ever since our current situation has been unfolding, my houseplants are my new friends, so I thought it would be nice to add a few in here as well, if only my plant that I have was that giant. But yeah, so in terms of details, one other thing that I wanted to point out, I'm going to be talking about how cylinders work in 1-point perspective, in 1 and 2-point perspective, but I've added a few cylindrical forms in here as well. Now I've left just the little bit of horizon line here that you can see just barely ghosting through my wall, so that you can see how a cylinder is rounder as it moves below or above the horizon line. So that makes sense when you remember that the horizon line is your eye level, because if you're looking at a cylinder directly in front of your eyes, it's going to look flat. And the more it drops down or raises up, the more those curves become a little bit pronounced. I've also done just a little bit of shading here. It's pretty minimal because I'm drawing with a whiteboard pen, which is a very blunt drawing instrument. On one of my future lessons, I will be going ahead and using a mechanical pencil, and I will be able to show you some perspective drawing that has a lot more detail. But for now, just notice how I'm using my contour hatching and my hatching to either reinforce the roundness of my shapes or flat planes. I've also used just a tiny bit of stipple through my floor, partly to create contrast with my other marks, and partly because as I get too close down under my vanishing points, my space will become kind of skewed. So one way to disguise that is with the use of rounded forms like cylinders and more diffuse textures like stippling. Okie dokie, so this is the last any of us will be seeing of this drawing. It's all just castles in the sand. Yep. I think I take a perverse pleasure from obliterating the worlds that I create. There's something nice in a drawing about being able to go back to a blank page. Okay, so since I focused last time on an interior space in 2-point perspective, I'm going to go back and I'm going to do one in 1-point perspective. So I'm going to try to do this really fast. We'll see. So once again, I'm going to establish my horizon line, and then I'm going to establish my vanishing point, and I'm just going to stick it right there. Now, For interior spaces that are based in one point perspective, some things that work really well are hallways, actually, because they reinforce that telescopic space. So some of you may have seen the video that was compiled out of Stanley Kubrick's films, in which it showed how he employed one point perspective to really elongate space and just make it more claustrophobic. So, sorry guys, we're about to enter the creepy hallway. And if you have seen me do this before in my actual classroom, just follow along. I'll try to keep it fresh. So I'm going to switch to a different color pen, and let's see. And I'm going to have one line here, and I don't always like it when my lines are super symmetrical in terms of my diagonals. So I'm actually gonna maybe make this one, I could make it a little broader, or I can make it narrower. Maybe I'll make it narrower. Is that too symmetrical? No, it's fine. Okay, so now I'm gonna return to my fence post method shortly. But before that, I think I'm just going to establish where my ceilings are going to be. Okay, so in terms of this, the way that I established my ceilings is just to create kind of the inside of a box. Obviously, it is not totally perfect, but we will find our way. And you might notice I have a little space left over here. I'll find something to do with that. Don't you worry. Okay, so if I'm going to do my fence post method, I'm going to actually start on the wall where I have a little bit more room. Okay, now if I'm going to make my next point, maybe, you know what, I'm going to make this a little bit narrower. Okay, and let's reinforce that. All right, so my next step is going to be to find my center point, and it's actually just below my horizon line in this drawing. And then I'm actually going to switch to my red pen because this is going to generate a lot of lines. So I'm going to go from my top corner through that point, hit the bottom, and then move up. And it's important that I keep my lines straight. Oh, it's already starting to fall. And again, one way I can check this is just by lining up something with a right angle. And let's see, that's not quite right. If my hallway starts to collapse, this scary hallway will get that much scarier. And these midpoints where I'm crossing through are all lined up going towards my vanishing point here, but it's a little bit misleading just because it's so close to the horizon line. Now, what I'm going to do, I have this side, and this side can be used to generate this side. So what I need to do, if I can, is just send a line on over, and let's make sure that is correct. I want to make sure that things stay nice and either parallel or perpendicular to my horizon line. Okay, so now I can use those lines and I can just move upwards and use that to generate the side that would be a little bit harder to figure out. Okay, so I'm going to go through and erase some stuff out. I've only got just a couple minutes to go, so we'll see. All right, and then I'm going to turn these into some doorways. So when I turn these into doorways, I'm going to actually switch back to my blue pen. And I'm going to draw the tops of my doorways, and to line up my tops, I can just go straight across. Let's see if that's straight. And then go down to my vanishing point. So let's do a tiny bit of erasing. If I ever leave my apartment again, I might get a Q-tip so I can erase with a little more precision. Okay. Now, if I'm going to turn these into some doorways, that's not going to be too difficult. What I could do is just erase out every other line. Okay. All right. So, hopefully this is becoming a little more clear. If I shade them, that would, I think, make just a little bit more sense, but maybe I will go back and just use my black pen to make that just a little more dominant. And if the doorway was open, I could project a little bit of depth into that space. Okay, so all I would need to do is repeat this process on this side, and I could generate some doorways over here. Let's color some in. Okay, so if I wanted to make a tiled floor, all I would need to do would be to divide this up into equal segments and then run those lines back to my vanishing point. So I'm going to do that really quick, and then I will show you the next step. Thanks, guys.